started. Mark, in that regard, please take it away.
Will do. So welcome everybody. On behalf of the School of Medicine Alumni Association of the School of Medicine and the Office of Graduate Medical Education, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of 5 presentations in the Transitioning into Practice webinar series. Today, you will hear from a representative of the AAMC who will speak about debt repayment for clinicians and the CARES Act. Our seminar and the resources we will provide you following the series are made possible by the generous financial support of UUMG Community Physician Group. But first, a few housekeeping items. Your microphone was automatically set to mute when you entered the webinar, but we do ask that you keep your cameras on unless you're stepping away. Our presenters do like to see a live audience. If you have any questions you would like addressed, please enter them in the chat box, and our team will make sure they get addressed during the Q&A session or in follow-up with you. Now on to our presentation. It is my pleasure to present Julie Fresne, Senior Director of Financial and Career Advising Services for the Association of American Medical Colleges. Julie has over 20 years of medical student loan and education debt management experience, including serving as the Director of Student Financial Planning at Georgetown School of Medicine. Sorry, at the Georgetown School of Medicine. I know how fussy they are about those things. Her experience includes working with medical student loans on both the lender and loan service sides. She works closely with medical school community, most notably career advisors, financial aid officers, and graduate medical education staff on issues surrounding education debt management and career advising for both medical students and residents. Julie frequently speaks about education debt and loan repayment strategies. Julie, thank you for your time this evening. Welcome back to Utah, and welcome for this evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark and Jackie. I appreciate it. I just was noticing that that picture of me is the non-COVID version. How times have changed. And I'm delighted to be back. Normally I'm there in person, and I can tell you I would much rather be there in person, but I'm happy to be talking to you with this evening. It's a casual session. Please, make sure that you put your questions in the chat, and Jackie is going to interrupt me or one of our other co-hosts this evening if questions come up. But my main goal is to leave plenty of time at the end for your questions and to make sure that we get them answered. And I'm going to jump right in because I want to make sure we cover as much as possible. This is a time of transition for you again. And, I know that there's a wide variety in terms of graduation dates and how long you've been in your residency positions or possible fellowship. But if you remember back to any of the sessions that you had when you were graduating, whoever was talking to you about your loans probably said, you're going to go into your residency, you're going to make these decisions, and then at the end of residency, you're going to sit down and take a look at your strategy and see if anything's changed in the last couple of years, and certainly in the last 6 months. So I'm going to do a quick overview, mainly about where to find information about your loans and things to consider when you're looking about where to go from here. And then I'm going to just go through what the repayment options are that are available to you now. I'm going to talk again about public service loan forgiveness and where we are with that. And I'm going to talk about how things have changed with COVID-19 and the various and sundry provisions that have been made for you with COVID. So jumping right in, I want to point out a resource that we have on our website, and it's called the Education Debt Manager. And this again is being videoed, but please jot this URL down. And the reason I tell you to jot it down is, we're talking for 45 minutes tonight, but you know that your student loans are pretty complicated and there are a lot of details, and you don't want to sit here while I do a brain dump on you of all the details that I know about student loans. But if something doesn't make sense, or if you want more information, this is an evergreen publication that's on our website. And it is always talking about what the current state is of education debt and what your repayment options are. And one of the things I love about this publication is it's great to take to a financial planner when you go to see a financial planner if you haven't already. I can tell you from experience that not very many financial planners are really well versed on the nuances of student loan repayment. So this is a great way for you to help educate them about what your repayment plans offer in terms of terms and conditions. Let's talk first of all about COVID, what's happened in the last couple of months with COVID and what may be happening, what's sort of on the table for discussion. And first of all, through an executive order, President Trump suspended monthly payments and interest accrual on federal student loans from March 13th through September 30th. Now, for most of you, you probably are either in forbearance or deferment, or you're in repayment. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing and the best thing in that bullet point right there is that there's been no interest accruing on your loans from March 13th to September 30th. And that's really significant for all student loan borrowers, but particularly for borrowers like med school, law school, MBA, dental school, folks that have a little bit higher debt usually. And the CARES Act does not apply to any private loans. So if you ended up doing some kind of a private loan while you were in school, or if you did a residency relocation loan to get yourself to Utah for your residency program, it doesn't apply to those private loans. And it does apply to Perkins and what are called FEL loans. And FEL loans would be really old loans that you had in your portfolio. Perhaps you took some time off in between undergrad and med school, and those were undergrad loans. They're pretty old, but I'm going to give you a way to figure out what you've got in a minute and be able to tell. The other great thing about it is if you were currently in an income-driven repayment plan, these payments are now zero and they're not accruing interest. But if you're interested in public service loan forgiveness, those essentially zero payments are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So they are still counting towards any forgiveness that they would have counted for if you had been making them. During that period, you can opt out of the zero payments. You obviously are not going to opt out of the zero interest, but you can opt out of the zero payments and continue to make your regularly scheduled payments, but you actually have to call to make that happen. There's not a way that I'm aware of online because this happens so fast and servicers, just can't pivot that fast. Perhaps now there is, but there wasn't back in March. You have to make the call if you want to continue to make those payments, and you are certainly welcome to do that. The payments work the way they always did, though. Those payments will go to accrued uncapitalized interest before it goes to principal. And then recently, through an executive order plus congressional action, it was extended through the HEROES Act to January, I'm sorry, not through the HEROES Act, it was extended to January 2021. The House recently passed the HEROES Act. It hasn't passed in the Senate, but they passed the HEROES Act, which would extend it through September of 2021. And I mean, that would be amazing for you. It would be a really great benefit. A couple of other things that are on the table, because I know you will be interested in this, is the HEROES Act, which would expand the zero interest through September of 2021, also adds an additional $13 per hour for essential frontline workers working with COVID patients. We're very much in support of that at the AAMC. One of the things that we really like about it is it also helps frontline workers who perhaps don't have student loans. They may not be the doctors and the nurses, but they are the other people essential to the hospital that are keeping things up and running. In terms of student, I'm not going to bore you with the details. You can find them on our website. if you're interested in them. But there's a proposed act that would forgive graduate student loans for healthcare workers who are directly treating COVID patients. There is an act to provide $5 billion in funding to the National Health Service Corps to be linked to the National Disaster Medical System. So for those working in primary care and healthcare shortage areas. And then there's a pandemic responder act that would grant $40,000 to each frontline worker that is working with COVID patients that has student loans. So there is an awareness on Capitol Hill. We are very much in support of all of these relief packages. The AAMC Action Network, if you're not involved in that and would like to become involved in that, I am happy to send Jackie the place on our website. We have a Washington highlights. If you just type in aamc.org/Washington highlights, you should get a page on our website that talks about everything that's going on currently and all of the proposed legislation around these kinds of things. And we do have a grassroots action network that if you are interested in becoming involved in it, we would love to have you on board with that. So that's what's going on with that. How you can find out more information about your loans, and it could be you kind of put it on set it and forget it while you were in your residency. So just again, to give you an idea, some things have changed. Everything has been consolidated in the federal student loan world into one website, and it's called studentaid.gov. And you definitely will want to write that down because, like I said, everything is now through this website, and eventually servicers and payments and everything will be through this website. Not quite there yet, but finding information on your student loans has become consolidated in this website. And when you log on to studentaid.gov, this is the homepage, and you're going to get this login button right here. And when you log in, you're going to see basically what your loan balance is. And you're going to have all of these options, including manage your loans. And if you click on manage your loans, you are going to be able to go to a summary. And I pointed out here where you can get on the summary, where it will list all of your loans. The other kinds of things that this will tell you on this website is it'll tell you what the interest rate is, what the disbursement amount was on each of those loans, if it was a subsidized or unsubsidized loan. And if you've forgotten what that means, subsidized meant that you weren't paying interest on it during certain periods of time. Unsubsidized means it was accruing interest from the time the check was cut, essentially. It's going to tell you if it's subsidized or unsubsidized. And most importantly, it's going to tell you who your servicer is. You probably know this already, and I apologize if this is hugely repetitive to you, but I promise you, I have done these sessions where I've talked to residents who've just simply forgotten. They've been so busy, they have forgotten how to find this information. If you have not already, bookmark this site and then bookmark your servicer's site. And again, you probably already have because you've been filling out paperwork with them already. But if you want all the information in one place for your federal student loans, this is where it would be. You can download it. You can download this file. It'll plop it on your desktop. And in a moment, I'll show you why you might want to do that. You can put it in an Excel spreadsheet, but I promise you it's nearly impossible to make sense of. Before I show you why you might want to download it, the thing that's not going to be in that centralized database is you are not going to see any private loan information. If you did have one of those residency relocation loans or one of those private loans from undergrad, you're not going to see it there, but you will see it on your credit report. Now's an excellent time to check your credit. You can do it free at annualcreditreport.com. Don't confuse that with freecreditreport.com. Freecreditreport.com is not free. Annualcreditreport.com is free. You can pull a credit report. It combines your credit from the 3 major bureaus once a year. And just take a look at it. Make sure there aren't any issues, that everything on there is yours. And now's a good time to check it. All right, why would you want to download that file onto your desktop? So perhaps you know about this already. Perhaps we didn't have it at the time you graduated. The AAMC has something called the MedLoans Organizer and Calculator. It is a calculator, it's the only calculator out there that will accurately represent the interest rates on your loans through medical school, what residency meant in terms of your salary and your loan payments, and then through and beyond through repayment. It's a great tool. It is, of course, an estimate. You know, we have to make a lot of assumptions with it, but it's a really great way to get a sense of what repayment looks like. So if you haven't seen it already, you know, take a look at it. We just made some enhancements to it. It'll allow you to add spouses debt in the calculator, whether they are a medical school grad or not. It's just a great way to see examples of repayment. Real quickly, these are interest rates for the last, you know, 13 or 14 years. I put them up here. You know, I have no idea when you all graduated, but I figured if you're all coming out of your residency, this is probably about the right time frame. You'll notice on the bottom there, for a period of about 8 years, everything was at a fixed interest rate of 6.8 and 7.9%. And then you'll see after that things switched, and you'll see that it was different every year. And what that means is it was a variable fixed rate, which I know that sounds crazy, but what happened is, let's say you took out a loan in 2014-15 and the rate was 6.21% on your direct unsubsidized loan. And again, these are federal loans that we're looking at here. Let's say the rate was 6.21%. That chunk of money is at 6.21% and will stay at 6.21% for the life of that loan. But the next year that you took out money in the academic year 2015-2016, that direct unsubsidized chunk of money, the interest rate on that chunk was 5.84%. You can find these interest rates on our website or on studentaid.gov, and you'll see them on studentaid.gov based on your exact loans. The reason I put this up here now is it's not, you know, so much that I think it's important for you to memorize the interest rates on your loans, but you should know that, again, if you have loans during this period of time, that they may be the same loan, but it may be at a different interest rate for different parts of it. Now, it's also possible that you consolidated all of your loans at graduation into one loan. And if that's the case, then it has one interest rate and you're only dealing with one loan. That's fine. But the reason that it's good to be aware at this point about the different interest rates is because many of you are going to be in a position to overpay on your loans. And if you want to overpay, I'm going to tell you how to do that. But if you want to overpay, you want to make sure you pay on the loan that's costing you the most money. So if you've got some loans that were between 2006 and 2013 that are at 6.8, and you've got some between 2013 and 2014, you'd want to make sure that if you were going to overpay, you direct it to the loans that, you know, you took out that were at the 6.8%. And I'm going to tell you how to do that too. So it's just a good idea to go back into that studentaid.gov, assess what you've got, and look at your strategy again. So again, most of you, and there are always exceptions, but most of you, when you got out of medical school, remember you had, most of you, a grace period of 6 months where you didn't have to do anything. And then you had to make a choice. Am I going to start making payments on my loans, or am I not going to start making payments on my loans? For most of you, if you decided you were not going to make payments on your loans, you did that through something called forbearance. There's also a possibility that you did it through deferment. We'll talk about that. But for most of you, if you're not paying on your loans right now, it's likely that you're in forbearance. And forbearance is, it's an arrangement essentially with your lenders And basically you don't have to make any payments is what it boils down to. And you applied for forbearance in yearly increments. So when you got done with your grace period, you likely filled out a request for forbearance that lasted a year. Hopefully you applied on time for your next forbearance, and so on and so forth. And the reason why I said hopefully you applied on time, because if you apply on time and there are no breaks in your forbearance, it postpones the interest capitalization on your loans to the end of residency. And that's a good thing, because remember, capitalization is when they add accrued interest to the principal of the loan. All medical residents are automatically eligible for forbearance simply by virtue of the fact that they're medical residents. The thing that's kind of different about it is that if you had any of those previously subsidized loans, meaning they weren't accruing interest, they start to accrue interest during a forbearance, which is what differentiates it from deferment, which we're going to talk about in a sec. So as a reminder of what capitalization is, you have your principal, which is the amount that you borrowed. It's the amount that you took out every year. If it was an unsubsidized loan, it was accruing interest, but you can think of it, certainly during the time that you were in medical school, as accruing interest, but that interest was sort of going into a different jar. And every time they calculated the interest, they still calculated the interest on the principal. And the interest just built up in that separate jar. Capitalization is when your servicer takes that jar and adds it to the amount of your principal, so that the amount that is accruing interest gets bigger. So if we take somebody who borrowed $200,000, and I realize that there's probably a wide variety. You know, when I thought about what number to do with this, I thought, you know, most of you graduated a while back and your amounts might be considerably lower. And then I thought, well, maybe you're attending this session tonight because you were in the group that wasn't lower. So I went with the nice round number of 200 that's pretty close to what the median debt has been for the last little while, because debt has leveled off somewhat. And what that means is, if it was all in unsubsidized borrowing, after grace period, your loans would have capitalized, and the amount of interest that accrued while you were in school and during the grace period would have been added. So you borrowed 200 at the end of your grace period, and these numbers are all rounded. That's what the asterisks are for. At the end of your grace period, about 33,000 would have been added to that. And then from that point forward, the number was 233,000 that was accruing interest. So if you've been in forbearance for, say, a 4-year residency, during that period, 233,000, again, these are federal loans, and it's based on current interest rates for a 2016 grad. So I went 4 years back, 2016 grad. You know, you can kind of figure in your head, and you can go back to the Men's Loans Organizer and Calculator and see what your numbers are for all of this, because it's accurate. All you have to do is upload that file from studentaid.gov. It'll put it all in there in the right years. It'll calculate the interest. It'll give you a good idea. Again, you know, we have to make some assumptions. We don't know how much your income is going to go up. We don't know how much, you know, inflation and federal poverty guidelines and that kind of thing, but it'll give you a sense of what repayment might look like for you. So during that 4-year period of time while you've been in residency, based on the loan interest rates for a 2016 grad, that 233,000 would have accrued about 58,000. So now at the end of forbearance, if you've been in forbearance, at the end of forbearance, that loan is going to actually, the interest is going to capitalize, and the balance at repayment is going to be 291,000. So assuming you've been in forbearance, that's what someone with 200,000 would look like. Now, I'm not saying that you might be able to make a payment on it now, but it always comes up, the question always comes up, you know, can I make a payment or can I make an overpayment or can I make a payment on it before it capitalizes? And I put this in here because essentially you can make a payment anytime you want on your loan balance without any penalty. But there are a couple things that I want you to remember when you do that. And one is, again, this is why we talked about the interest rates. Make sure that when you're making a payment, you're targeting your most expensive loan. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what the loan balance is. The amount that you have sitting there in each loan is not as important as what the interest rate is on that. So you want to target the payment on the loan that's costing you the most. Now, how you do that, and this is super important because I have worked in a servicer and I know how they do things, you want to make sure you make that payment separately. So if you're in a particular repayment plan, you want to make that required payment. And then you want to get online, or you want to write your check, however you want to do it. You want to send that off to the servicer, and you can do it online separately. Make your required payment, make sure it posts to your account, then make that separate payment with specific instructions on what you want them to do with it. So I want this payment to go to loan number 897456, and that way it'll get to the loan that you want it to go to. And then you should circle back, I don't know how long, you know, maybe a week, and see that, make sure that they applied that payment correctly. And if they didn't, get on the phone with them, they'll make it right. The servicers are really not out there to get you or make life difficult. It's a tough job, and they will work to make it right. And if they don't make it right, there's a student loan ombudsman through the federal government, and they will help you get them to make it right. So that's how you make a separate payment. And a lot of you are going to be in a position to overpay, and you're going to choose to do that. All right, the other way you might be postponing payments is through a deferment. It's very, very similar to forbearance. There's almost no difference in it, except if you had those old subsidized loans, which most of you, if you have them, you don't have a whole lot of them, but if you have them, they go back to being subsidized, meaning they don't accrue interest during that time. The other main difference is that you have to qualify for this. You can't just say, I'm a resident, and you get it like forbearance. There are pretty strict requirements. Same thing though, you've applied for it each year. There are a number of deferments. If you're married with a stay-at-home spouse and children, it's possible you are not paying on your loans through what's called an economic hardship deferment. If you've been active duty at any time, if you are, if for some reason you were unemployed for a short period of time, or you were in an eligible fellowship, those are all ways that you could have deferred your student loan payments. So again, really the only difference between that and forbearance is if you had subsidized loans, they were subsidized during that period of time. Now let's talk about if you had chosen repayment. And then what I think I'll do once we go through the repayment plans, I think I'll stop it at that point maybe. Ask if there are any particular questions, finish up, and then we'll open it up for all questions. So if you decided that you were going into repayment, there are two kinds of repayment plans. And the first are the traditional payment plans. These plans are based on a certain period of time. We call them time-based. The standard payment plan is a 10-year payment plan. The extended payment plan is 25 years. And the graduated payment starts with lower payments in the beginning, and then the payments go up gradually. Now, you can see from these payments that there aren't a whole lot of residents that choose these during residency. This is based on 200,000 by the way. And you can see that they're pretty aggressive unless you have some other form of income other than your residency stipend. So we don't see a ton of residents going into these plans. Usually if residents enter into repayment during residency, they do it through one of the income-driven plans. These plans base your payment on your income, not your debt. Now, that's a lot of plans right there, as you can see, and they all have different terms and conditions, and I'm going to leave this up here for a minute. I know it's a ton of information, but I'm figuring you can go back to it and take a look at it, and there's an even better chart in the Education Debt Manager. It's just too big to put up on the screen. But a couple things to remember about these loans, as you can see in the eligibility across the top, pay as you earn has this funky, it's a cohort of borrowers that are eligible for it. So you can't have loans prior to 2007, and you have to have a loan after 2011. So there's this period of time that, you know, if you borrowed or didn't borrow, you're not eligible for that plan. And I'm sure you went through all of this when you graduated. And then you have to show a partial financial hardship, which is not hard for residents to do, because it simply means that what would have been your standard payment, and you probably don't remember what that was for 200,000, but it was about $2,500. If the standard payment would have been higher than the income-driven payment, which was $300 in pay-as-you-earn, you qualify. So again, take my word for it, it's not hard for residents to do. And then the payment amount in the income-driven is based on a formula that they run, which is also in that Debt Manager book if you really want to see the formula, or I'm happy to answer that question in the Q&A. And then the payment term actually matters on these, not just because it's how long you have to pay off the loan, but for pay-as-you-earn, repay, and IBR, if you go through that repayment term and you haven't paid the loan off, even making your income-based payments, if you have money left over, it'll be forgiven. So for people with high debt, that can be a really great option for them. And yes, I realize that's a long time to be paying on your loans. There's a payment cap in pay-as-you-earn and IBR, which means, you know, your payment doesn't go up into infinity. You know, as your income goes up, there's a certain point where it gets capped. And then there's an interest subsidy on pay, repay, and IBR. On pay-as-you-earn, the orange, and IBR, the brown, they're not huge and not all that to get excited about, but the repay subsidy is a fantastic subsidy, and it can make a real difference for borrowers. Let's see, capitalization is a great benefit. And as you can see, most of the time it capitalizes when you leave the plan, or, you know, when you hit the cap, but it's not consistently, like a lot of loans that are commercial loans and certainly private loans. And then there are various and sundry things about when your spouse's income fits into it. Again, if you need a refresher on that, that is all in that Education Debt Manager and on our website in various and sundry formats. I'm going to go through a repayment example. And actually, Jackie, why don't I stop and ask if there are any questions at the moment that we want to answer, and then I'll go through the repayment example and talk about public service loan forgiveness.
Would anybody like to ask a question? Anything direct or clarifying? Please feel free to unmute. You all have the ability to unmute your own microphones at this point in time. I guess everybody's...
Great, I'll keep going. And like I said, we're gonna open it up in just a couple minutes anyway, and we'll answer every and all remaining questions. I'm gonna run through a repayment example For an MD who did 4-year residency, 200,000 in student loan debt, PGY1 salary of 54,000. That was actually the median PGY1 stipend back in 2016. This is a 2016 graduate post-residency salary. I used 250,000. You can argue with me that that's too high. You can argue with me that it's too low. You can put whatever you would like in the MedLoans Organizer and calculator. That's where our data sort of lands on the topic that we have at the AAMC. And then what that means is in net income.
Sorry to interrupt. It looks like Lindsay does have a question, but we're having trouble unmuting her. So as soon as we can get...
Sorry, can you hear me?
There you are.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no
totally
worries.
fine.
I was just going back to the income-based repayment plans. Can you just talk about what the interest subsidy actually is and how repay is a lot better than the other ones?
I sure can. Yep, I sure can. So the interest subsidy on pay as you earn and IBR, they're great, they're fine. They are on any subsidized loans that you had prior. So, you know, some of you have them. If you do, it's usually not a whole lot, but if you had subsidized loans for the first 3 years of your residency, some of that interest was subsidized. The thing that's so fantastic about repay is if you're in repay and the monthly payment that you're making does not cover the interest that accrues that month, 50% of the remainder of that interest is subsidized. So with somebody who borrowed $200,000, let's say that the monthly interest that's accruing on that is around $1,000. And, you know, depending on what year you graduated and what your interest rates are, it's going to be somewhere around in that area. So let's say that the interest that accrues on your loans every month is $1,000. Your payment, let's say it is that $300. You make that payment. Obviously, $300 does not cover the $1,000 that has accrued. So 1,000 minus 300 is 700. That's the leftover. 50% of that is subsidized. So essentially, $350 goes away for that month. So for people with higher debt and or longer residencies, it can make a big difference. And I'm going to do a repayment example and I'll show you in just a sec.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Keep those questions coming. All right, 200,000 in student loan debt, PGY1 salary, 54,000, host residency, net income, meaning this is what I have to live on, is about 13,500. It's from Paycheck City, which is spelled wrong, I see, Pacheco City down there. You can go out to Paycheck City if you are moving now, and you can actually look at the city and do the appropriate state taxes. And this is probably run on DC, because usually when I do them, it's just, you know, run in DC if I don't know where it's gonna fall out or you're gonna be. So numbers are rounded and estimated. Again, let's say that you did forbearance through a 4-year residency. You made 0 payments during your residency. However, your post-residency payment now, you're coming out of your residency, you haven't made any payments, you're going into the standard 10-year payment plan. It means you're gonna make the same payment every month, and at the end of 10 years, you're gonna be done. Post-residency payment, $31.59-ish. And that means 200,000 turns into 379,000 at the end of the day, and you've taken 14 years to repay your loans. If you entered pay as you earn, your payments during residency were probably between 300 and 400, somewhere in there. And when you get out now, and if you stay in pay as you earn and ride out your time during pay as you earn, your payments coming out will probably be around 1,900. and they'll go up to 2,500. You'll be paid off in 19 years. That's if you let it ride the whole way out. Now, looking at that net monthly income, you may decide, like, you know, you're making 1,900 now. That's a starting net monthly income. You may decide, look, I can make payments of 2,500 or 3,000. It's a heck of a lot more than I'm living on now. I still have 10,000 to live on. You can always overpay. And then if you did revised pay-as-you-earn, it's 300, same thing, because it's still 10% of your discretionary income. Repay does not have a payment cap, so the payments are going to be higher, which means you're going to pay the loan off earlier because you're required to make higher payments. And it's like any other debt, the more you pay, the more quickly you get that paid off. And then IBR requires a larger payment up front. So you end up with a larger payment throughout that period of time to pay that loan off. Now, I ran some quick calculations just to look at this particular plan, and the forbearance was standard. If you say, I haven't made any payments, but post-residency, I'm going to pay $5,000 on my loan, and I'm going to live on $8,000 a month. Let's just say you have the ability to do that. It would cut about $50,000 off that total repayment amount and bring the total years of repayment down to about 10. And that might be too aggressive for you, but you could, in either pay-as-you-earn or revised pay-as-you-earn, apply the same principle and overpay $2,000 per month and bring that period of time and the amount down. And you know, part of what I really like thinking about, and I think has a huge impact, is just how many years in total repayment you save. So in just the standard one, you save 4 years of repayment. You have that responsibility out of your mind and off your back, you know, 4 years earlier. So overpayment as a strategy, unless, of course, you're going for public service loan forgiveness, which we're going to talk about next. But for those of you who are married, we have a bunch of resources, and there's an entire section in the Education Debt Manager on being married and how spouse's income affects your payment in each of the repayment plans, but also if your spouse has debt. And then again, in the Med Loans Organizer and Calculator, it's not perfect, but you can get an estimate if your spouse is an MD and has debt, or if your spouse is not an MD but has education debt, how that might play into it. Public service loan forgiveness has not gone anywhere, despite people talking about it going somewhere for the last, gosh, I don't know how many years. Every president's budget for the last 5 years has suggested eliminating it, but a president's budget hasn't passed in at least 5 years. So, you know, there's periodically legislation that eliminates it. It will depend somewhat on the results of the election, but every piece of proposed legislation that we have seen at the AAMC grandfathers anybody who is currently a borrower, even, not even in repayment, not even expressed still be eligible. Public service loan forgiveness is people who are pursuing a career in a not-for-profit or community-based organization. It is only eligible on your direct loans. You need to be making payments, and you need to make 120 of them. And it can be in one of the income-driven repayment plans. It can be in the standard plan. It cannot be in the extended plan. But, you know, all of those income-driven repayment plans that we talked about are eligible. And again, you have to be working for an eligible employer. And how you verify that is on your services website and our website. You can get what's called an employment verification form. You fill it out, you answer a couple questions. I'm sure some of you have already done this. you have your institution, your employer answer a couple questions, you send it off to a servicer, they notify you back and let you know. Our doc, we decided, was a pediatrician, and according to the Association of Community-Based Physicians, her starting salary would be around $165,000. Again, you can think that's higher or lower. The Midlands Organizer and Calculator will tell you how much you stand to have forgiven in public service loan forgiveness. Eligible payments, we said pay as you earn was the payment plan she was going to choose. And in the end, she pays $112,000 during that 10-year period of time. We included student loans off in 6 years after residency if she's been making those payments. Don't forget, there are still opportunities available through a number of federal organizations, particularly if the National Service Corps gets this funding that may be proposed. NIH still has grant funding for both part-time and full-time positions. You will find information about all of these different opportunities on our website, and I'll show you in just a minute how you do that. And then at the bottom there is a link, aamc.org/ST loan. If you've decided that you always wanted to live in California, you can go out to this website. It's very clunky. I'm not gonna lie, we're in the process of re-engineering it, but you can type in California and it will pull up everybody in California that is willing to pay you to come work where they need you. So check those options out. You also are going to have the option, and you will get offers to refinance your student loans. These are private lenders, essentially. If you haven't gotten them yet, I'm surprised, but offers, or you have to have seen them on social media. The SOFIs, the Doctors Without Quarters, there is Common Bond. And what they are doing is they're offering to refinance your federal student loans for you. And their offer is that they can offer you a lower interest rate than your federal student loans. And sometimes they can. The thing that you really have to do is make sure you absolutely understand the terms and conditions of those loans. And that's because they are essentially consumer loans. You are prime lending material because you have, such great job stability and income potential. So they will offer you a lower interest rate. But if you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, or you want loans forgiven through, National Health Service Corps or NIH, they aren't going to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. I can tell you that. So you just have to be aware. They're no longer federal loans, so they don't come with the terms and conditions of the federal loans. And also you want to check and make sure your federal student loans are forgiven in the event of your death or permanent disability. And for those of you who have families, it's something to consider. They will go after an estate or an insurance policy, that kind of thing. So you just need to make sure you know what you're getting into. But let's just say you don't owe that much money, or you're going to be making income. You could pay your loans off super fast if you had to, because the other thing about them is they offer you this super low interest rate. But most of the time, the lowest interest rate is going to be a variable interest rate. Now, interest rates are super low. You cannot get much lower than they are right now. That's why there are so many of these lenders out there. But if you have a lot of loans that you're going to have for a long time, the interest rate on them is going to go up and down. I mean, it's not going to go hugely up and down in a year, but it could really fluctuate. I did a quick calculation right before I got on about if you took that $291,000 that was the balance after residency, and you compared it just to the standard. So you've got that $291, you're going to go into standard, and you say, wait, I'm going to look at a refinancing loan, and they're going to give me a 3% interest rate, and I'm going to pay it back in 10 years. The savings was something to look at. But again, if you need the flexibility, if you need the income-driven payment amount, if you are looking for public service loan forgiveness, you want to be extremely careful. And you just want to make sure that you understand and you read everything and you know, make sure you know what interest rate they're going to give you, because sometimes that interest rate that's on the website is not what they end up giving you. So I put Financial Wellness for Medical School and Beyond. That's a program that we have at the AAMC. And the reason I put it up there is because this is the calculator in that program. And it's on our website. The MedLoans Organizer and Calculator is on our website, aamc.org/first. We have everything you could possibly want to know. There's a great search button. You can see it in the top right of the screen on the left where it says search now. Plug in whatever you want in there and you'll find it. The MedLoans Organizer and Calculators on it. And so is this financial wellness program. You do have to create a logon. That is because it tracks information for you and it saves it. So it has a budgeting app in there if you want to keep your budget in there. Now, lots of people are using things like Mint and NerdWallet, and that's all great. Those are all, up to you. But what I like about this program is it has, should I buy a car or lease a car? What's the difference? What do I need to know about mortgages and buying a home? It's got tons of information out there like that. Again, it's got all kinds of calculators. It also, I think, has a paycheck calculator. This is the calculator. I ran that calculation in really fast. All right. I did not do as well on time as I hoped. I'm going to open it up for questions. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm happy to stay on until people's questions are answered.
Thank you, Julie.
Let's open it up.
Okay, so everybody please unmute and if you have questions to speak directly to Julie. I mean, we're a small enough group. I'd like to try to just keep this discourse going. I will say that this video is being recorded, and so we will be sharing it with those registrants who were unable to participate, but it will only be for the month of September through October 1st. Because we want to make sure that the data is relevant and is fresh.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Lindsay, you have a question?
Yeah, and thanks, Julie, again, that was great.
Thank you.
I guess more of a vague question, but if we're doing public service loan forgiveness and, going from training to a job, I guess, is it individualized whether or not you change your plan, or do you recommend just sticking with the plan that you've been on?
So there, for the most part, you can't go wrong with, what plan are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm on repay.
Yeah. So if you are planning and you're in a good position for public service loan forgiveness, I'd say just stay with repay and don't, worry about changing over. The only thing I would say, two things. Sometimes if people aren't wanting public service loan forgiveness, but they want the payment cap, they switch over to pay as you earn. But if you can manage the payment, and you're doing public service loan forgiveness, you should be able to manage the payment. I would say stay in repay. And I say that only because every time you move payment plans, they capitalize the interest. So if something were to happen and it fell through that, you ended up paying it off, you'd have that capitalized interest. But I'd say if you're on track, you're in a good position, you can stay with repay. And unless your income is going to skyrocket and you're worried about that cap, or if you have a spouse with considerable income, those are the only times that I think, it might not be a bad idea to look at pay.
Okay. And then just a heads up, I wasn't aware of this before. I switched payment plans during residency when I found out repay was a thing, because it wasn't when I graduated. And it does take at least a month for it to kick in. So you do lose a month on the public service loan forgiveness. That counts on there if that matters to people. But.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? So I put up on the last screen, and let me just pop it back up there in case you didn't. We have a box at, oh, I got to get back to Zoom. We have a box at the AAMC where you can send general questions. It's first, the word first at aamc.org. You are welcome to send questions to that box, and somebody on our staff, we have 3 incredibly knowledgeable people that monitor that box. And you can even, if you put in there, say, I heard Julie on the University of Utah session, can you ask her? They will send it to me. And I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. And Lindsay, I'm happy to get on the phone if you want. Send an email to that box and tell them that I said I would. If you want to send an email to that box, I'm happy to get on the phone and just talk about your situation, and if it makes sense to stay or switch.
All right. Well, it looks like you answered everybody's questions as you were talking, Julie. So I want to say thank you again very much for your time. You are East Coast time, so it's almost bedtime for you.
It was my pleasure.
So I really appreciate that. As I mentioned, this will be recorded, has been recorded, and we will be sharing it, but only for the window of when TIP happens. So our next presentation is next Thursday. And we do have registrants for that. So if you haven't registered, Lindsay or Grim, please feel free to do so. And with that, we'll go ahead and end our webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating.
Good night, everyone.